is March, and right here on the college footballs, we don't really talk about college basketball, so March for us is spring football, right? And spring football gives way to the NFL draft, right? You understand. That's why we're leading the show with the number 1 pick being traded from the Chicago Bears to the Carolina Panthers. And the Panthers gave up a lot to get the number 1 overall pick. 2 first-round draft picks, 2 second-round draft picks, and a DJ Moore, which is a big deal for the Panthers because that was their best receiver. Now, Justin Fields has dudes, DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney, Khalil Herbert, to help him at Chicago. And you understand how I feel about Justin Fields. Seems to be a thing with Ohio State quarterbacks because at number 1, the guy who has the best odds to go to Carolina is another Ohio State quarterback by the name of one C.J. Stroud. That is Cole Beathard Stroud the 4th, right? I know his full name. I know a government name because you understand that I spent a lot of time reporting a very long feature for Fox Sports going back to last year, and I'm a tremendous C.J. Stroud fan. Now, I don't particularly believe in betting odds in as far as how I make my decisions, but I like to know that I'm thinking what they're thinking because I like to be right just as much as anybody else likes to be right. It's another reason why I think that Stroud is going to go to the Carolina Panthers. Now, as we have recorded this show for you, Andy Dalton has signed a 2-year, $10 million deal to go with Carolina. Frank Reich has basically kind of tipped his hand saying, I kind of like C.J. Stroud a little bit better than another guy I'm going to talk about named Bryce Young. But owner David Tepper, according to Adam Schefter over at ESPN, has said, I kind of like Bryce Young. And the guy signing the checks has a lot to say about what the personnel is going to do. Just ask Dan Snyder about another Ohio State quarterback that went in the first round. And casually, every quarterback Ryan Day has started for at least one game at Ohio State has become a first-round draft pick. That is a tremendously big deal. It's a tremendously big deal because not even Lincoln Riley can say that, even though he has 2 number 1 overall picks and 3 Heisman winners. Unless Spencer Rattler blows up South Carolina next year, we expect that trend to end, right? Pick back up with Caleb Williams. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I also think it's important to point out because Ohio State is not a quarterback factory until Ryan Day gets there, okay? Before Dwayne Haskins was selected in the first round of an NFL draft, the last guy to do it playing quarterback at Ohio State was Art Schlichter back in like 1984, okay? All right? Which brings me back to what do you do with that number 1 overall pick? This is the earliest that we've seen an NFL franchise trade for the number 1 pick since 1978, right? Damn near 2 months, in advance of the NFL draft. Last time that happened, Houston went to number 1, drafted a dude by the name of Earl Campbell. Okay? That is a guy that you build your franchise around. And frankly, one of the coolest and most fun tailbacks in the sport. You look up football in the dictionary, you're going to look up and see Earl Campbell right there. Last time that Carolina had the number 1 overall pick, they also used it on a quarterback. You'll know him as Cam Newton. Now, I understand I'm in the minority on this in believing that Cam Newton is the greatest college football player of all time, but it also has to do with what he had to work with, right? Which is Auburn. And Auburn fans know that it ain't shade. It's Auburn, okay? It was Cam Newton and Nick Fairley, and that's about it, okay? He took that all the way to the national championship, won a Heisman Trophy. So why should the Carolina Panthers take C.J. Stroud at number 1 as opposed to, say, Bryce Young or even Mr. Quarterback Freak Anthony Richardson? It is because, number 1, C.J. Stroud has the highest floor of any of these quarterbacks. When you look at him, it's almost like, your homegirl is cruising Bumble and she comes across this dude that doesn't have a single red flag. Checks every box. He's even 6'3". He's taller than you, okay? He weighs 215 pounds. He's sturdy. He smiles well. He's got a good spirit. He believes in his faith. He threw for 3,000 yards last year and 40-plus TDs and 4,400 yards the year before that and 40-plus TDs. There's a whole hell of a lot you could do to go wrong in not picking C.J. Stroud, right? Now, he throws an accurate ball, and that is going to be the thing that separates him from, say, Will Levis, right? Will Levis, and some others, right? Including Anthony Richardson. What he doesn't have that Bryce Young does is elusivity, right? which is another way of saying that I've seen Bryce Young needed to be dead to rights. He should have been a dead man, and yet he escapes. Meanwhile, CJ Stroud is back there just moving around so that he can throw. And anybody that's seen CJ Stroud run knows that ain't the dude that you want taking off with the football. But at a place like Carolina, where you're going to have guys like Chuba Hubbard, Shi Smith, and others to help you out, and a defense that's stout, Brian Burns, J.C. Horn, you can afford to go get your guy that is the franchise signal caller, and that's number 7 at Ohio State. Now, another way of looking at this is Frank Reich basically kind of said Bryce Young's size is a factor for him. I don't really believe in size. Might be because I'm short and slight, but you can try me. You're welcome to try me, just like you're welcome to try Bryce Young. He won a Heisman Trophy being just that size. I don't think it's that big a deal. But if it is to Frank Reich, that is the opinion that matters, right? That opinion and that of the owners. Other reason I really like Stroud in this spot is his story is one I think Carolina Panther fans can get behind. We talk about CJ Stroud on this show because, again, I got a deep well on CJ Stroud for this show. Got to know his mom pretty well over the last couple of years. Got to know him pretty well over the last couple of years. A couple things jump out to me here. He should not exist in his present form, okay? When he was a sophomore in high school, he was ranked 838th in the entire country in his recruiting class, okay? He bet on himself, asked his mom to drive him upstate to a regional for the opening. Showed out, won the regional, got an invitation to Elite 11 in the finals at the opening, right? In Frisco, Texas, and won the damn thing. And not long after winning the damn thing, gets a call from Ryan Day going, would you like to come play football at the Ohio State University? And it wasn't until Ohio State fandom descended on that family for which his mother started to understand. It's one thing to be a Power 5 quarterback. It is another thing entirely to be an Ohio State quarterback, especially when the quarterback is the offense at Ohio State in a way that it hadn't been in some time. You look at tailbacks, right? You look at not even wide receivers here until late. You look at offensive linemen. You look at edge rushers and defensive tackles. It's only in the last 5 years that we started to pay attention to who the quarterback is at Ohio State in as far as being an NFL quarterback, right? The offense that Urban Meyer was running was not one that let the quarterback be the kind of person that you want to draft with number 1 overall to play quarterback. Okay? That's just a fact. Now, on top of that, he handled the pressure so terribly well. Now, you want to knock CJ Stroud for losing to Michigan twice? Be my guest, right? I mean, that it's out there. I'm also going to add in there that he threw for damn near 350 yards and 2 TDs with 2 picks against Michigan last year in that loss, right? Played pretty damn well in what was essentially a blizzard the first time, 2021. Even with all of that, we're talking about a guy that played 24 games and won 20 of them, right? Right? You know, I guess we could talk about Kyle McCord having started that one game against Akron, but score would have been the same. Just take a look at what he did against Toledo last year if you really want to go at that. But it's also a man who went up against the best defense the sport had to offer and put him on the ropes. Like, if Kirby Smart isn't in his football brain to call a timeout when we knew a fake was going to come, that game goes to Ohio State. Because you're looking up and you see that CJ Stroud was taking apart Kirby Smart's defense. And I'll add this. It is the second time in 2 years for which he was made to play at least some portion of the season without his number 1 target. And in this case, 2022, almost entirely without his number 1 target. So 2021, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, 2 guys that led the offense as receivers, decide, hey, we're going to sit out the Rose Bowl because we're going to get drafted in the first round of the NFL. Okay, cool. He said, Jackson Smith and Jigba, you are up. 15 catches, 347 yards, and a Rose Bowl win. We talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba's game in there. We don't talk about how CJ Stroud threw 573 yards, 6 TDs, and 1 pick. Numbers, fam, numbers. All right, let's take it into 2022. We expect JSN to be a Heisman candidate. Pulls a hammy, is out for basically the entire year. And what does he do? He creates a kinship with Marvin Harrison Jr. that has led many of us to once again believe the best receiver in the sport for the second straight year is at Ohio State. Now, I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba and Marvin Harrison deserve a ton of credit for how they caught passes from CJ Stroud. I would also point to you and say, what's the constant here? The constant here is the guy with 7 on, all right? The constant here is a guy who had to earn it every step of the way. He had to earn that 5-star ranking, and even then, he didn't get to keep it, right? He just 40th in the country, just outside of that. Beat out Jack Miller and others for the starting job, right? Demonstrates over and over again that he has not just the intellect and the talent, but the intestinal fortitude to carry the banner at the Ohio State. It is a guy for which I don't know that you could do any worse. Now, getting to Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson in this discussion for a little bit. Bryce Young is going to be a great NFL quarterback. He just might be one for the Houston Texans, maybe the Carolina Panthers, maybe they shock us all, or even perhaps, my goodness, you want to go and get him for the Detroit Lions. You want to go get him somewhere where he could play right away, but maybe doesn't need to. Maybe he gets the Patrick Mahomes treatment that we're trying to give Anthony Richardson. But if you want to take a look at what he did in 21 and say he won the Heisman and lost the national championship, you can do that. But I think what he did in 2022 is even more impressive to me. It was more impressive to me because this is the worst receiving core that I'd seen at Alabama basically since 2014, okay? And the way that I couched that is the leading rusher was the leading receiver at Alabama in 2022, Jahmyr Gibbs. That means that the wideouts were not doing for Bryce Young what, say, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith were doing for Mac Jones, right? Also, quiet as it's kept, Bryce Young got a national championship. And one of the wildest stats in the world, if you played football at Alabama and you stayed for 3 years, you won a national championship. Just ridiculous. So he's got that championship pedigree. It's just his frame. Really, only his frame. That is the drawback here. He's 5'10". He weighed in at 204. He probably plays around 195. It's good enough to play football in the modern NFL because you can't hit nobody no more. I mean, you can, but not like you used to. So when we used to talk about you needed a Drew Bledsoe type, that's because you had dudes that was coming off the edge that could decapitate you, and there was no penalties, no roughing, right? The NFL has now said the quarterback is the sport. We cannot afford to have seasons where Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, where Patrick Mahomes doesn't play. We're talking about Lamar Jackson and how he did not play and how that's affecting his contract negotiations, which is a factor I need to throw in here on my way to Anthony Richardson. The only way you could talk me out of taking CJ Stroud, or for that matter, Bryce Young at number 1, is if you somehow traded to go get Lamar Jackson, okay? I always want to take a former NFL MVP in his prime before I want to take a rookie, all right? 2 unanimous MVPs in the history of the NFL. One of them is Tom Brady. The other one is Lamar Jackson. One of those dudes has retired at plus 40. Another of those dudes is the same age as Stetson Bennett will be as a rookie quarterback in the NFL. If you can make that happen, you go make that happen. But let's assume that Baltimore is smart and they're going to find a way to keep Lamar Jackson on their roster and Carolina's going to draft a quarterback. There's still Anthony Richardson to talk about. Okay, let's talk about Anthony Richardson. I was loud in the preseason about how Anthony Richardson reminded me so much of Cam Newton, for which a lot of y'all wanted to tell me I was crazy. And the reason you would say that is because he didn't play well in 2022, right? But when he had some highlight reel plays, it looked a lot like what our YouTube and Fox Sports viewers are seeing on the screen right now. It's a guy running away from people. It is a guy shucking people off. It is a guy with a cannon for an arm. Perhaps it's just fixing his footwork, as many people say, and then he becomes a quarterback. But that still takes time, okay? I don't believe that Anthony Richardson is a guy you take number 1 overall because you have to sit him. If you play him right away, you could hurt him. And by that, I mean his ego, I mean his psyche, and it might get to him that they want to get Andy Dalton in there really quickly, right? Other part about that I think is important is the people part of this, because one of the things that kind of upsets me about sports in general is how we are so given to the math on this. Like, I love watching Anthony Richardson run the 40. I love the NFL Combine. Pro days are like one of my favorite things because I thought I was going to be a strength coach, right? That's where my heart is. I like to see people being big, fast, and strong and doing stuff that Captain America can't do. The thing about Anthony Richardson, though, is he's not the guy that you could throw right away into the Carolina Panthers offense and say, go. And if you are a guy on that team, you don't care about what the future of the franchise is going to look like. And you certainly don't care that some dude who charts his own stats wants to tell you that Anthony Richardson has great advanced metrics or could have great advanced metrics. You want to know that the quarterback is going to go win you football games. And that doesn't just matter for the guys on that roster. It matters for the front office. It matters for the marketing folks who have to call other folks who sell ads to say, hey, we're going to put the quarterback on the front. You say CJ Stroud in Ohio State, people hop too. You say Anthony Richardson might be, but we're going to go with Andy Dalton. Maybe not so. You want everybody pulling in the same direction on the quarterback because the quarterback is the CEO of your franchise. As much as people hate that, that's the guy that we're all looking to. That is the guy who is going to be the face of everything that you're trying to do. You need everybody on the team to believe in that. The other thing about Anthony Richardson that kind of gets at me is I don't think of him as anything other than a luxury item right now, which is to say the Seattle Seahawks, I think, are in a great position to draft an Anthony Richardson, or the Dallas Cowboys. You have a veteran quarterback that not getting any younger, but also is good enough to lead your franchise in 2023. And also a good enough pro to teach Anthony Richardson how he is supposed to go and do this. Anthony Richardson is a Ferrari. He's very fast. He's extremely pretty to look at, and he's got curb appeal. But that ain't what you take at number one. What you take at number one is something that's got a little bite to it, gets macho when it's time to hitch the toe and go. You need something that's got four-wheel drive, ain't afraid to drop it in a low gear when it's spitting snow, and you got to go get the wife's SUV up out the ditch. That's what the Carolina Panthers are right now. You ain't got clean road. You have wilderness to trudge through. You got mountains to climb. You can't do that waiting on it to get spring and sunny to drive your Ferrari. You got to go right now. So if you got to go get into your new Bronco rather than your new Ferrari, then go do that, right? And then maybe CJ Stroud trades up into that, you know? Maybe somebody finds some way to unlock him, not unlike Frank Reich did with Carson Wentz. Still one of my wildest things, right? Frank Reich turned Carson Wentz, Nick Foles into Super Bowl caliber quarterbacks. What do you think he might be able to do with a guy like CJ Stroud, who is ready-made right now to put a football anywhere he wants to put a football and over them mountains, okay? That's how I see this going for Carolina as of today. Caveats. NFL draft is weeks away. People make moves all the time. Free agency news is happening over and over again. I think we're going to see more people trade up, more people trade down. I don't see Carolina getting off this number one pick. I don't think you trade up there without knowing that you're going to go get your guy. It's about whether or not you want to tell people you want to go get your guy. But I think Carolina is going to be smart about this, right? Just do what Cincinnati did. Hey, is Joe Burrow the best quarterback in the draft? Cool, let's go get him. A couple years later, playing the Super Bowl, all right? It ain't got to be that hard. And I know it sucks to say that because it makes it feel like you and I can do the job, but that ain't where our job begins. Our job begins in, the job begins in rounds 4, 5, and 6, right? That's where the job begins because those first 4 rounds are only for guys that make my 53-man roster. And if I got to kick off, say, a defensive back that can make us a little bit more solid for a guy like Anthony Richardson, who I'm betting on down the line, I got to know that I'm already going to get what I want out of Anthony Richardson, and it's not going to hurt my football team. Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.